Barrow-in-Furness is a shipbuilding town of roughly 66,000 people on the northwest coast of England. According to Politico, this one town has become the load-bearing wall of a submarine pact linking the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. A workforce shortage there could ripple through the entire multi-decade program. The town's name rarely makes international headlines, but according to the report, the shipyard at its center is now trying to do something no British submarine builder has attempted in generations: build 3 different classes of nuclear-powered submarines back-to-back, almost at the same time, for 2 different navies. This video walks through 3 things in order. First, what the AUKUS submarine agreement actually commits the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia to build. Second, why officials and analysts point to this one town's shipyard capacity as a bottleneck for the whole arrangement. Third, what's at stake if the town falls behind, and where the reporting draws a line between confirmed program details and analysts' concerns about the schedule. Start with what the pact actually is. AUKUS was announced in September 2021 as a trilateral security partnership between the 3 countries. Its highest profile piece, what most people mean when they say the submarine deal, was laid out in March 2023 when the leaders of the 3 nations met in San Diego and described what officials called the optimal pathway. That pathway has 3 stages, according to the official announcements made at the time. In the first stage, already underway, American and British attack submarines make more frequent visits to a naval base in Western Australia, giving Australian personnel hands-on experience around nuclear-powered boats they don't yet operate themselves. In the second stage, starting in the early 2030s, the United States is set to sell Australia a small number of used Virginia-class attack submarines. American officials have said up to 5 to bridge the gap before Australia has boats of its own. In the third and largest stage, the United Kingdom and Australia are to jointly build an entirely new class of attack submarine based on Britain's next-generation submarine design and incorporating American systems. The Royal Navy is due to receive the first of these boats, built in Britain, by the late 2030s. Australia's first one, built at a shipyard in Adelaide, is expected in the early 2040s. That new class needs a name to be useful here, so here it is: the SSN AUKUS. Its British half is being built at exactly one shipyard, the BAE Systems submarine yard in Barrow-in-Furness. Here's the part that doesn't make sense until you know the town's history. This isn't a new arrangement. Barrow has been Britain's only submarine building yard for well over a century, tracing back to the Vickers shipbuilding company that operated there from the early 20th century onward. Every submarine the Royal Navy has ever operated was built in this one town. That's not a bottleneck created by AUKUS. It's a structural fact about British submarine construction that AUKUS is now testing harder than any peacetime program before it, because for the first time this single yard has to run 3 submarine classes through its build halls at once instead of one after another. I went back through the public statements and reporting around this program, and one detail keeps nagging me more than any other. It isn't a number. It's a scheduling problem. Barrow isn't being asked to build 1 new submarine class. It's being asked to build 3 programs worth of submarines at once in the same yard with the same finite pool of specialized labor. Here's the obstacle, stated plainly. Barrow-in-Furness is currently finishing the last boats of the Astute-class attack submarine program. At the same time, it has already started cutting steel on the Dreadnought class, the 4 submarines that will carry Britain's nuclear deterrent starting in the early 2030s, replacing the aging Vanguard class. Now, on top of both existing commitments, the yard is expected to begin construction of the SSN AUKUS boats before the decade is out. 3 submarine programs, 1 yard, overlapping timelines. According to the Politico report, that overlap, not any single design or funding problem, is the real choke point officials are watching. The solution, as BAE Systems and the UK government have described it publicly, is to grow the workforce fast enough to run all 3 programs in parallel rather than in sequence. BAE Systems has said it aims to expand its Barrow workforce from around 12,000 people to somewhere near 17,000 by the early 2030s, roughly a 40% increase, concentrated in one town in under a decade. The company has opened new apprenticeship and training programs, and the UK government has committed billions of pounds in submarine enterprise infrastructure funding, part of it tied specifically to the AUKUS pathway to expand the yard's physical capacity alongside its headcount. That's the plan on paper. Whether Barrow can hit it is the open question underneath this entire story. There's a second obstacle sitting under the workforce one, and it's physical, not human. Building 3 submarine classes at once doesn't just take more workers. It takes more space to build them in, at the same time, without one program's schedule bumping into another's inside the same dockside build halls. BAE Systems has acknowledged it's investing in expanding its Barrow infrastructure alongside the hiring push, because the existing build halls, sized for one program at a time, were never designed to run Astute, Dreadnought, and SSN AUKUS construction simultaneously. Expanding a submarine build hall is itself a multi-year construction project, running on its own timeline, separate from the submarines it will eventually house. Here's what's surprising: if you haven't followed submarine construction before, you can't just hire your way out of a shortage like this. Building a nuclear-powered submarine hull requires welders and engineers certified to work with nuclear-grade materials and reactor compartments, most of whom need years of training and security clearance before they're allowed near the build hall. Britain's submarine building skills base shrank for decades after the Cold War wound down, when orders slowed and the specialized workforce that once existed retired or moved on without being replaced at scale. Analysts cited in defense reporting describe this as the real constraint. Not steel, not funding, but the time it physically takes to train someone for this specific, dangerous, tightly regulated work. That skills bottleneck closes one part of this story. Britain has a plan, a town, and a shipyard capable of doing this work in principle. But it opens the next question: whether the ramp-up can move faster than the historical pattern of British submarine programs, which haven't always kept to schedule. The Astute-class program is the cautionary example analysts keep pointing back to. Independent reviews, including reporting drawn from the UK's National Audit Office, documented years of delay and cost growth in that earlier program, much of it traced to the same kind of skills pipeline gap Barrow is now trying to solve at a larger scale for 3 programs instead of 1. The Dreadnought class, running alongside all of this, raises the stakes further because it isn't just another attack submarine program. It's Britain's nuclear deterrent. 4 Dreadnought-class boats are being built to replace the aging Vanguard-class submarines that currently carry Britain's continuous at-sea deterrent, with the first expected in service in the early 2030s. That program doesn't have flexible scheduling. A nuclear deterrent replacement effectively has to arrive before the boats it's replacing age out of service. So when Barrow's build halls get congested, Dreadnought is the program with the least room to slip, and SSN AUKUS, the newer and more politically visible commitment, is the one most likely to absorb any delay if the yard's capacity runs short. Officials haven't said that publicly in those terms, but it's the structural logic several analysts in defense industry reporting have pointed to when explaining why Barrow's capacity matters beyond AUKUS alone. Worth pausing on what this tells us about the broader picture. AUKUS was framed, when announced, mainly as a strategic and diplomatic achievement, a rare case of the United States sharing its most sensitive submarine technology with an ally. What gets less attention is that the pact's success was always going to be decided somewhere far less glamorous than a summit stage, on a shop floor, in a training pipeline, in whether a mid-sized English town can recruit and certify enough specialized tradespeople fast enough. The politics were solved in San Diego. The execution risk lives in Barrow. And it isn't only a British capacity question. According to reporting from U.S. Naval Institute News and other defense outlets, the American side of this arrangement carries its own version of the same problem. The U.S. Navy's own Virginia-class production has run behind the Navy's stated targets for years, a shortfall American officials and congressional oversight bodies, including the Government Accountability Office, have documented in multiple reports. That's fed a genuinely unresolved debate in Washington. Can the United States sell Australia several of its own submarines in the early 2030s without leaving its own fleet short, at a moment when its shipyards are already struggling to keep pace with the Navy's own orders? Reports in 2025 indicated the U.S. administration conducted an internal review of the AUKUS pathway, examining exactly this question. That review's contents haven't been fully made public, and this video won't guess at what it concluded, only note that it happened and that multiple outlets reported it. Here's the unpopular take, and we'll say it plainly. Building a 3-nation, multi-decade defense pact's timeline around the hiring pipeline of one shipyard town of under 70,000 people was never a hidden risk. It was baked into the plan the moment officials chose to concentrate all of Britain's new-build submarine capacity in a single location instead of spreading it out, or investing years earlier to rebuild the skills base before layering 3 programs on top of each other. That's not a scandal. It's a structural bet made in public that a lot of coverage has treated as a surprise. So where does this actually stand right now, as of this reporting? Confirmed. The optimal pathway's 3 stages remain official policy in Washington, London, and Canberra. Confirmed. Submarine visits to Western Australia are already happening. Confirmed. Barrow is simultaneously working Astute, Dreadnought, and early AUKUS-related preparation, and BAE Systems has publicly stated hiring targets to match. Not confirmed and genuinely open. Whether that hiring ramp lands on schedule, whether the Virginia-class transfer to Australia survives the American production shortfall without political friction, and whether the first UK-built SSN AUKUS boat actually reaches the Royal Navy on the late 2030s date officials have cited. Analysts are split on how much confidence to place in that date, and the reporting is explicit that this is a projection, not a settled fact. Put yourself in the position of a defense planner in London for a second. You've signed a treaty-level commitment to 2 allies. You have exactly 1 town capable of building the submarines that commitment depends on. And the workforce that town needs doesn't exist yet. It has to be trained from scratch, person by person, over the exact years the treaty's timeline assumes will run smoothly. There's no shortcut available. That's the position Britain is actually in right now, stripped of the diplomatic language. So here's a fair question, and not a rhetorical one. Is pinning a pact this significant on one town's ability to scale up a specialized workforce, a smart, achievable industrial strategy, or a weak point that's going to keep resurfacing every time this program hits a schedule review? People who cover this closely genuinely disagree, and it's worth thinking about rather than assuming an answer. What happens next mostly comes down to watching 2 things over the coming years: whether Barrow's headcount and training pipeline actually track toward that stated 17,000 figure on schedule, and whether the first steel cutting and construction milestones for the SSN AUKUS class land where officials have said they will. Neither of those gets settled by a single announcement. They'll show up gradually in quarterly reports, National Audit Office reviews, and BAE Systems' own public updates, the kind of unglamorous paperwork that actually determines whether a headline-grabbing pact delivers submarines on time. Worth being clear that Barrow isn't the only place carrying this risk. It's simply the earliest and most reported one. Australia's equivalent build site, the Osborne Naval Shipyard near Adelaide in South Australia, is where the Australian-built SSN AUKUS boats are meant to be constructed from the early 2040s onward, under a state-owned shipbuilder that, by Australian officials' own admission, has to grow a nuclear-capable submarine workforce essentially from zero. Australia has never built a nuclear-powered submarine before. Osborne faces a steeper version of the same problem Barrow faces, except Barrow at least starts from a century of submarine building experience, and Osborne doesn't. There's more in the underlying reporting than fits in one video, including how that Australian build-out at Osborne is tracking against its own workforce targets. Comment more if you want that story covered next. For now, the clearest honest summary is this. AUKUS committed 3 countries to a submarine sharing arrangement spanning decades. Almost none of that arrangement's fate rests on diplomacy anymore. The treaties are signed, the stages are defined. What it actually rests on is whether one English shipbuilding town can grow its skilled workforce faster than it ever has before, without cutting corners on work where a mistake is measured in reactor safety, not schedule slippage. The politics of AUKUS were the easy part. Building it, in Barrow, is the part that's still genuinely uncertain.